It seems the mic is working. That's good. Welcome everyone over here today. I wasn't expecting the whole room, but happy to have you here, guys. My name is Piotr Siejczuk. I'm working at Accenture as a solution architect or a technical manager. I'm mainly working on projects based on Magento, but we also do e-commerce projects based on other platforms. My experience is with Magento, and today I would like to tell you a few words about a topic that I prepared. That's global reference architecture. And I'll be trying to cover both application and infrastructure side of this topic. A few details in just a moment. And the remote is giving me some problems. Oh, thank you. Yeah, technology. Apparently the first battle was won. Yeah, this is something that I'm working with Magento. I have some colleagues in my office that do different things. One day I just came back after some holidays, and I got this, and I just decided to share that with you guys. So yeah, I don't know if you guys were on Ben Mark's presentation, but he was telling that if you do know Magento, you will have work for sure, and you will have the funds to pay your bills and so on, right? Apparently, knowing Magento is sometimes not everything. There are some extra skills required. Anyhow, Magento helps a lot. Okay, so let's start with some basics, with some beginnings. Before I'll start to talk about the global reference architecture, or the shortcut will be GRA, or in Polish it will be just GRA. I'm not going to play any games today, but yeah, it sounds exactly like the Polish name, GRA. So yeah, but to start with, probably all of you guys implemented or worked or are managing websites based on Magento. So you are most likely aware of some, let's say, some decisions you have to make while you're actually doing the structure of your store, right? You can have websites, you can have stores, you can have store views, right? All of that, and the way how you basically organize it implies how you can later on operate your business, right? Because as you are probably aware, only on the website level, without any extra customizations, right? I'm talking only about out-of-the-box approach. So, on a website level, that's only the place where you can have unique prices for your products. I listed a few things. I'm not gonna go in details with all of them, but what you need to be aware is the fact that based on different level of your setup, there are different things you can uniquely configure or not, right? So yeah, let's jump to the next slide. So this is just a hypothetical example of a website of an e-commerce that is running on a single instance. So, and in my example, I decided to pick 3 brands, brand A, B, C, right? They are all working on the same code base of Magento, and they're all connected to a single database. What's behind it? If there's some data replication, some slaves, master-slave setup, that's a different story. But the main point, this is probably, the most simple would be to have just one brand and one database, right? But in some more complex situations, you can have three brands, or, at least 2 different selling models, B2B and B2C. Connected to one database, right? Running on one code base of Magento. Let's go a bit deeper or in more complex cases. This is showing more or less the same with the difference that this is actually running on multiple instances, and each brand can or not necessary, can be set up on a dedicated infrastructure instances. But one of the main points is that we have exactly the same 3 brands, but each of them is having a dedicated database, right? That's because of few factors which I will be talking later on as well. This is just some star and extra case. Probably few of you are aware, I hope most of you, that Magento is also having this feature that is called database split or database sharding. I just decided to show that, let's say, one of the brands, instead of connecting to a single database, can have 3 separate databases connected to each other, to the code. One of the parts of the database is responsible for the checkout. One is responsible for the order management system, let's say. Those are just the names, let's say, conceptual. And the third part of the application is basically taking care about the whole rest of the standard flows, right? Yeah. So again, this is one extra high-level example of how things can be structured, right? This example is showing multi-stores and multi-instances set up. So the country A, country B, and C basically are running on each of those countries is running on a dedicated infrastructure, so dedicated servers behind it. Yeah, let's say the structure is that we have 3 websites, right? Under first country A, we have only 1 store, but 2 different store views, right? And the standard, let's say, or one of the most let's say general examples, that we'll just have different languages. One will be English, one will be German. Then we have the country B, 1 store, 2 languages, English and French. And in case of country C, we'll have 2 stores, store C and D. And one of the stores will be running the Polish language, the other one will be running a Czech language, right? So, like, we started from a simple things, right? This is going much into more complex solutions. And basically, so before I will go there, this is basically showing that my topic is not necessarily meant for the most simple projects, the most simple solutions you'll have to support. This GRA, so Global Reference Architecture, is actually meant for more complex, more global projects. So for brands that are running their businesses globally, that they have their stores in multiple countries, and on top of that, also selling in different selling models, like business to customer, business to business, or a mix combination of both, right? Okay, so going further, right? There are some advantages behind both options, like having a single instance, having multiple instances. Of course, obviously, in case of a single instance, you have a single point of administration. The content can be shared between the brands. Like integrations will probably propagate one content across all the websites that are there. There's a single, and this is probably a point of discussion. There's a single deployment process. It's simple to implement, right? If it's good for all the business that you're running, not necessary. If you are running more than 1 country, more than 1 brand on your single instance, well, you don't necessarily want to, let's say, run the deployment on both or on multiple of your websites at the same time, right? If you have a single deployment process, most likely you'll have to have a short maintenance in all of those pages that are running on the single instance. Of course, one of the benefits, especially for the business marketing people, would be that the reporting is combined into one single place, right? You don't have to run the reports on multiple instances and just later on combine them in a, let's say, even different tool, different analytical tool. It could be Magento Business Intelligence. It could be some other tools that are supporting multiple sources. On the other hand, what are the benefits or what are the advantages if you're running your solution in a multiple instance environment? So yeah, on the contrary, the content in your store can be unique, and the amount of data you do have to sometimes let's say synchronize between different systems could be significant, right? And if that's the case, if you're running a single instance, the performance can impact also the other websites that you're running on that single instance, right? Following that, you can have dedicated integrations that are splitted between the websites, that they are not, let's say, linked to each other and can work independently. Talking about independence, let's say, of this approach. Factors or areas like scalability of your application, the deployment process, that's totally independent from, let's say, the websites, the countries that you're running on your instance, right? You can run deployment, and that's something that could be part of this global reference architecture, that the common, let's say, strategy of running deployments, right? But the point here is that you can have dedicated deployment processes across your different countries, different websites. You can use the same if let's say, the circumstances are okay with that. Yeah, if you're running that independently, basically you don't have to put although, let's say, with the newest versions of Magento, you can execute close to zero downtime deployment processes. It still, in some cases, would require you to put your solution in a maintenance mode to execute some operations after deployment, right? Okay, and as I'm talking about infrastructure, right? If we are running the solution on on a multiple instance model, then we can separately, basically, scale, change, improve the infrastructure part of your solution, right? So what I'm saying, and I will be talking about it later on in terms of, let's say, some components that could be used in infrastructure. But one example could be that on one country, on one website, you are required, well, it's not, let's say, required, but due to performance factors, it's wise to use RabbitMQ, for example, to execute some asynchronous flows and so on, right? But on the other hand, your other website could be running much lower data volumes, data sets, and that one will not require to have RabbitMQ. And in a bigger setups, right, this RabbitMQ component could be set up totally on a dedicated either Docker image or a virtual machine. Devil is in the details, whatever you choose to use. So yeah, as I was saying, like GRA or the global reference architecture is not for every type of business, not for every solution. Some factors that would lead to, let's say, believe that you should consider to use the GRA would be the scalability of your solution. How agile you are in terms of implementing changes, introducing new features. And introducing new features, that sometimes also means that you're implementing some innovation. With the GRA approach, like, you would be building this innovation once, and this conceptual approach of your architecture would allow you to basically deploy and implement those innovative solutions, innovative features across your brands much faster than if you would be using different approach. So, what actually GRA stands for, or what does it mean in practice, or in terms of, let's say, technical aspects of the project? It means that we'll have a couple of, let's say, levels or packages of your code, of your solution. And the main one, the most important part, will be having the Magento core, components. So simply speaking, Magento out of the box, right? Then we'll have a level of master features of your project. So features that are basically shared across multiple countries, multiple brands, or different selling models, right? We'll have, well, as I call them, master extensions, right? So because I'm creative, or I would rather say I'm lazy. So whenever I can, I'm using out-of-the-box things that Magento provides, right? Only if something is not available in Magento, I'm just going to go for marketplace extensions, review the quality of that extension on top of what marketplace provides, and basically use such extension as a part of the master extensions code base, so I can easily reuse those extensions across different websites, different brands. Same goes for the front-end part, for the theme layout of your solution, right? Although you might be running multiple countries, multiple websites, there could be a common factor about the front-end part of your system, right? So to make your life easier, and later on in terms of maintenance of your solution, I would go with having this kind of like core theme, core layout for all of your websites, and share that across your brands. And yeah, something that I talked about before. So if you're a global organization, you might be running some third-party systems, third-party tools, right? That would be applicable for all the countries that you are having your business in, or all your selling models, right? So I'm just going to throw some random examples, like if you have a CRM system, that CRM could be used in multiple of your sites, and the point here is that you will create just a single integration and just basically customize it in terms of configuration on a website level to address a particular website, for example, right? And yeah, because of course not everything could be common, not everything could be put into one package, one basket. So on top of this core packages, the master project package, we'll have to put some smaller integrations, smaller features, smaller changes in your layout, some specific integrations that are applicable only for a particular brand or country, right? What is the point is that those, let's say, brand, country, B2B, B2C model level changes should be reduced to minimum. So in such, let's say, conditions, you will have to manage most of your application code in that core package, in the master package of your project. Okay, so this is more or less showing one more time in more graphical way the reusability of the components, right? Because one of the points is that I'm, let's say, following in the projects that I'm helping and supporting, working on, is that you should basically reuse things. If things cannot be reused, buy them, and only if you cannot buy something, you have to build it yourself, right? And basically this is showing this approach, right? So here we have the GRA core, right? That would be the infrastructure components that are shared across your whole project, different countries, different brands. Magento core, let's say the PWA approach, the team, right? Then we have the GRA, let's say the project master level, where we have the master integration, project master integrations, the project common extensions. Let's say if there's a specific PWA on this common level, it would go here. Same goes for the layout team. Then I just gave two examples, right? We have country A, country 1 and country 2, right? They will both use the GRA core and GRA project master packages, the components, and on top of that, they will have some limited features, changes, integrations or layout updates that are required only for this particular country, right? But they will be specific only to that country and that country only, right? The country number 2 will have totally different changes in that code package. Okay, so I was talking more about application part right now. I promised to talk about infrastructure. So let's say on this global level, the projects that we are working on at Accenture are, let's say, supporting multiple countries on multiple levels, and there are some things that would have that needs to be taken in consideration. So we need to think in details about the sizing, the scalability of strategy of the infrastructure. There are some things like our customers are asking us about in terms of backup and disaster recovery strategies, right? Some things like recovery time objective and recovery point objective. I'm not going to go into details about this, but for some bigger players, those factors are really important. And once you are basically designing the infrastructure part of your solution, those should be taken into consideration, right? And obviously, the high availability part is something that you need to have in mind. Probably some of you have seen this one. Unfortunately, due to some non-disclosure agreements, I couldn't, let's say, show exact infrastructure diagrams that we are using on our projects. But this one is basically showing how this GRA approach in terms of infrastructure would be achieved in, this is AWS, right? What's the idea behind it? And let me maybe just jump to another slide. This one is basically based on Google Cloud Platform. The point is, like, if you'll probably, well, I'm not sure if you can see it, but the idea is that those blocks, those, let's say, components, if you'll just combine them and put them one next to each other, this is actually showing more or less the same approach. Like, we'll have the same front-end servers, some application gateways, some bastions before getting to the end solution. We'll have some database, Redis components, Varnish components, RabbitMQ, right? And whatever is the infrastructure provider you will use, if this is AWS, Azure, well, Magento Cloud is having its specifics, but in let's say general, it's following more or less the same approach, right? So in case of our projects, when we are working on this part, right, we are building a common infrastructure that will be used across different parts of the globe, right? Of course, what we have to take in consideration is that, like, some of the hosting providers are not necessarily having the same components in different regions, right? So we'll have to go as close to a generic approach as possible, and only in those specific regions where, for example, Redis in a PaaS model, so platform as a service approach is not it's not available, then we'll have to go with setting up Redis on a virtual machine, for example, right? But the point about having this generic approach is that, well, security area would have to be addressed only on one generic level, right? Maintenance, it's much easier because we're having the same setup across the whole globe, across all of our solutions. And basically, time to market factor, so how easy and how fast is to set up such infrastructure is much, well, it's easier to re-implement this in different regions. And we have this common architecture that we can just spread around different countries. And once we are setting up new solutions, it's going to be faster and quicker and easier. So yeah, those are some most common, let's say, components that we are using when we are setting up this GRA global reference architecture for the infrastructure part. this example is based on Azure, so we'll be using Azure MySQL in a PaaS model. We'll be using Kubernetes to orchestrate our Docker images. We'll be having containers, Docker images running, having PHP FPM. We'll have a Varnish component, the Magento, and that stands for the whole application, the core, and basically all the customizations. We'll have, well, in our case, we're mainly using Jenkins as a continuous integration, continuous delivery tool. SoftNAS, in terms of Azure, is the solution that stands for the basically the shared media, shared components of the application. SendGrid is a component used for sending emails. There's some standard antivirus software. The Redis component, which in most cases we're using in a PaaS model, and New Relic as a tool to monitor application performance monitoring. So yeah, what are the benefits, right? Initially, when you are working on this GRA model and the project master, right, this is gonna take significant amount of time and effort, right? That would be the same for the first brand using it, right? But yeah, later on, if we'll be going for the next brand, I mean, as I said, this is for multiple brands for global players, right? If we'll go with a second brand, third, fourth, the time needed to implement and basically start your e-commerce would basically decrease a lot comparing to the initial start of brand A. So yes, there's some effort in starting this, but later on, if you're running multiple brands, multiple solutions in your organization, this will help you to, well, start new countries, start new brands faster. Also, if you're implementing improvements to your generic architecture, you can much faster and easier deploy it to the end brands later on. And yeah, something that basically I mentioned already, but the main benefits would be the time to market factor is reduced a lot. As I mentioned, like it's easier and faster to adjust your application components and basically quicker address new trends in the industry or new, let's say, best standards that are popping up in the market. New features, innovative features can be implemented and deployed to the end brands and countries much faster than if you wouldn't be using this approach. And probably for those big players, the most important thing is that the total cost of ownership of your solution and maintenance of it is reduced a lot comparing to have a dedicated solution for each brand, each country. And yeah, to sum up, it's basically about delivering meaningful solutions, meaningful features much faster and quicker to the end user. Is it easy to implement GRA and follow this approach? Unfortunately, that's not the case. You need to have your customer, your organization to be mature enough to understand this approach, to understand the benefits of it. So yeah, you need to basically develop some regime in terms of how you're working as a developer, as a team of developers, how you're running quality assurance processes. And basically on a business level, you'd need to have a team that will be, let's say, representatives of each brand, and they will have to do a common decision if something would be part of the global architecture part, or that would go only to a specific country or a specific brand. But yeah, the end game is that it's much easier and the quality of your solution would be much better. And this is actually what I just said without the slide, so I'm not gonna repeat myself. Okay, and that would be all from my end. Any questions, concerns? If not, I'm available at Accenture booth. We can talk there as well. Thank you very much, guys, for your time and attention. Enjoy the rest of the conference.